Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give it a couple moments while a few more people come in, but thanks for joining our Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative session today. If you came for the session on overcoming supply chain management challenges, then you're in the right spot. We'll get started in just a moment here. Susie, if you'll just give me the heads up when you think you have the live cast synced up, we'll get going with everything.
Okay.
I'm going to get going with some general announcements here so we can get things started and finished on time out of respect for your time and our presenters' time. Formally, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Entrepreneur Education Collaborative's virtual session titled Overcoming Supply Chain Management Challenges with Dr. Stephen Scholes. Today is Wednesday, March 16th, 2022, for anybody who's listening to the recording. I'm Blake Martin, a local entrepreneur like many of you and a founding member of the Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative, or EEC as we like to call it. The EEC, who hosts these sessions, is a collective effort of the following community resource providers: the Better Business Bureau, Catholic Charities, the Greater Omaha Chamber, and the Greater Omaha Chamber's Reach Initiative, the Nebraska Enterprise Fund, Nebraska Business Development Center, OPPD, SCORE Mentors of Greater Omaha, SourceLink Nebraska, and the Business Ethics Alliance and the U.S. Small Business Administration. Someday I'll have all those memorized. In the intervening time, I'm going to keep reading them from paper. You don't have to memorize them. Just know that we are your one-stop shop for all things small business education around here. Couple of housekeeping items for those of you who haven't joined us before. You might want to close all your browser tabs if you experience any bandwidth issues on these Zooms. Please be aware that all participants will be muted throughout this session, but we'll be checking questions real time via the chat function in Zoom and through any comments that are submitted to the Facebook Live feed. So go ahead and submit questions and comments beginning now and throughout the session. We'll try to answer every single one of those real time here. And if there are any unanswered questions or you think of any after the fact, just reach out to any of us in the EEC organizations and we'll make sure to get your question answered. We will record and post this session just like we do with all of them, of course, immediately on the Facebook livecast, and then also the downloadable and shareable version, which we always try to have available within 24 hours on our Facebook page. That will be posted to our Facebook page. You just search Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative on Facebook, or you can Google Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative. It'll bring you to us. We will continue the monthly sessions in 2022 in English y en español. In English, Wednesdays at 11:30 through 2022. The next one is Wednesday, April 20th, and that is on how to counteract the effects of inflation on your business. Another very timely topic. Y en español, el segundo jueves de cada mes. En el 14 de abril a las 6 de la tarde, 6 p.m., la próxima sesión es Seguros de Propiedad y Responsabilidad, Property and Casualty Insurance. And by the way, our May English session, Retaining Staff Without Breaking the Bank, that is set to be our first blended in-person and live stream virtual event in 2 years. We're scheduled to have the in-person version of that at Access Bank near 90th and Dodge, so pay attention to your email and keep checking our Facebook page for updates on that. Now to today's session, the real fun of it. Overcoming supply chain management challenges. Now, I'll be honest, when we scheduled to record today, we had no insider tips on today's likely Fed interest rate hike announcement, nor did we certainly know anything about the disruptions from the Ukraine war. But the timing is incredible for this topic, even if we didn't know what was going to be going on today. Fortunately, we have Dr. Stephen Scholes from the University of Nebraska, Omaha with us. He's a PhD from UNL and Associate Professor of Supply Chain Management at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Steve is routinely published in leading industry journals, and he focuses on supply chain integration, industrial purchasing, global sourcing and innovation, and strategic negotiations management. Here's the thing, he's not just a professor with tons of student accolades and awards, but also a practitioner who's plugged into what's going on in real world markets right now. He's a member of the Midwest International Trade Association, the APICS, the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, Nebraska Trucking Association, and on, including the Institute of Supply Management. He gets what's going on, folks. Fortunately, he's also generously donating his time to the benefit of local small businesses, including today. So, with that, Steve, I want to turn the floor over to you and thank you so much for volunteering your time today to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm always excited to talk about topics that are relevant for our business community, and we want to make sure that we keep everybody informed as much as we can. As we all know, things are changing at a very rapid pace, and we have to all strive to be well informed to make good decisions. So for today's topic, overcoming supply chain management challenges, this is a topic we've heard about and seen in the news for several years now. The pandemic really brought this to a forefront. So the timeliness is in pretty good shape today. In the past, and I'm talking pre-pandemic in the past, a couple of years ago, supply chain management was a little easier. Okay, we had an understanding of what our businesses were like and what we were trying to do as small and medium businesses. Some of us had to work with suppliers, and most of us have to deal with customers. So if we had a customer or a supplier, we had a supply chain, but we had a handle on who was a good customer and who was a good supplier. And we could focus on business operations, which was really good for all of us because it helped us become more efficient and more effective in operating our own businesses. Then we had some disruptions and changes occur along the way. We've talked about dynamic global markets for a long time, but the pandemic really brought that to the forefront for everybody. From businesses that had to close during the pandemic to the congestion at the seaports and just shortages and bottlenecks in the supply chains that we're dealing with today, has all helped us understand that we're all part of this global economy now, no matter how large or small our business is. Other changes that have occurred include things like the empowered customer. Even before the pandemic, our customers could learn more about our businesses, our products, and our services than ever before. What happened with that information is their expectations started to change. Expectations about timing and delivery and services provided and what really constitutes value add processes in their minds. So we have these empowered customers that in fact accelerated during the pandemic. As we saw everybody start to order more stuff online, e-commerce boomed, and we had customers searching for even more information than in the past. Other things that occurred as a result of the pandemic, or at least accelerated, has to do with the advances in technology itself. I've never done so many Zoom meetings as I have in the last 2 years. And we've all learned to communicate electronically and how to do learning itself. Online education is a big deal for all of us, not just in the classroom, but how we operate our businesses, what's happening with new product development, what's happening with our competitors, and so on. Then the other disruptions that have come along. COVID-19 will be the theme of where we're at today because that's what we were prepared for at the time of this discussion. But certainly the events in Ukraine and interest rates and inflation are all part of the discussion today. And we just have to, as smart business people, we have to stay abreast of what's happening and stay informed on how to deal with the opportunities and the challenges that are created here. I'm going to start this discussion off today with a discussion about COVID-19 as a source of innovation for small businesses and medium businesses. The devastation and the opportunities created by COVID-19 were mixed across the business front for our economy here. Some businesses were shut down, some of them didn't survive. Others became overloaded or swamped with business, depending on the kinds of products or services that they were providing to the market. And so we've had both opportunities. We couldn't meet demand, or we couldn't get enough supply, or we couldn't operate our business. So we had opportunities and devastation created by the pandemic, let alone the population that was devastated itself. What it's allowed us to do, though, is start to think about how we improve our processes. Yeah, okay, somebody's Okay. As we go back to the pandemic changes, what kinds of things did we see change along the way? We're going through this transition now. We're going through this transition of a pandemic to an endemic. We're not quite there yet. We're still in a pandemic technically, and so we can have some discussion about that, but we are still in that transition process. 2 years ago, when we heard about the pandemic, it gave us global thoughts and considerations and fears about our businesses and our families and friends and so on. And so those were the kinds of things we had to worry about. We have had a chance now to focus more on things like advances in technology, talent, and more recently, energy. And as we talk about the costs of production and operating our businesses and so on, energy and talent have become key issues. Technology, of course, continues to move forward, but at a more rapid pace than we have in the past.
Steve, I don't want to interrupt, but I had a comment back. They can't see the slides as you're going through, so you might have to click a share. Just had a text come through, so.
Okay. Let's just try this again and see, make sure we get this right. I apologize for that.
The fun of Zoom.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
That's coming through just as a little box on the screen. Maybe
okay.
Try hit start slide maybe, and it'll come through.
Never had this happen before. Okay. Let me just try one more thing.
Steve, do you have 2 screens?
Yeah.
It might be sharing the wrong screen.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
We can see.
I see. It is. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on here.
Steve, as you continue on there, I'm gonna try a plan B and see if I can just share it from my screen and you can walk me through the slides. How does that sound?
Yeah, if you could do that, that would help. That would help tremendously. So let me.
I'll let you continue with your.
Yeah, I can do that. So I apologize for that. So COVID-19 is a source of innovation. Has been a big challenge for all of us, and we've had to learn how to do businesses differently. We've had employees that have expectations change over time. We've also had changes in our customer expectations, as I mentioned earlier, but now we have all of these new challenges with bottlenecks in the supply chains and so on. So it's been a real challenge for us as small, medium businesses. It's been a challenge for everyone. But the key issue here is how do we move forward, and how do we, there we go. How do we move forward? And yeah, that'll one more. Keep going forward one more. There we go. We can just stop there. Yeah, so the opportunities lead us to this pandemic and endemic discussion. Opportunities with e-commerce, if you're involved with that. Bottlenecks, shipping, container management has become a big issue for all of us. Reverse logistics for firms has become kind of an interesting area of development because we've had a lot of stuff that's been hard to manage in terms of returns for products that were either damaged or there was incorrect shipment or something like that. And then, of course, I talked about the flexibility and communication preparedness that we have to deal with. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. Technology, talent, and energy. Those are the big 3 that I see as the areas of opportunity for innovation going forward for small, medium businesses. we have to learn to do more with less in terms of a number of different factors. We have our supply chain constraints, so we're dealing with those kinds of challenges on a regular basis, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly. We're dealing with the talent challenges. There are not many businesses out there that can hire the talent they need to operate their businesses at full capacity. And we're going to be struggling with that for a while. If we think about a state like Nebraska, our unemployment rate now has dropped below 2%. So we really have full employment in place here. And so finding talent has become a big issue for all of us. The pandemic drove the great movement and resignation or retirement. We see a number of people retire as part of this process. But in states like Nebraska, we have a new source of competition for talent, which is something that I see every day, which is the remote worker. I mean, most of the jobs are still on site, and we understand that. You know, there's production or fabrication or services and processing. Most of our jobs are there yet. But any jobs that can be remote now, we're seeing more and more people working remotely and living here. So they're getting the benefits of an income from, say, Silicon Valley and living here in our region for a better cost of living, higher quality of life, and so on. So right now, the businesses I'm working with are struggling a little bit just to compete with the resources and so on that are available. So we have to find ways to engage our talent pool and figure out how to talk about what's important to keep our businesses moving forward successfully. Next slide. What I like to talk about here, whether it's small, medium, or large businesses, is the hybrid workforce that's coming. It's interesting. We talk about robotics and the hybrid workforce, and you hear all kinds of high-tech phrases like artificial intelligence and data analytics and so on. But for small, medium businesses, it may or may not be as relevant as for others. On the other hand, we are all learning how to automate more processes. We're all learning how to use our technology at a different level than we did before. And it's changing how we do business, how we interact with our employees, how we interact with our customers. You know, I used tech support this morning on a chat on a product that I had ordered and it wasn't shipped correctly. And so, you know, it was easy just to get on and do a chat. And I would have never done that before the pandemic. I would have picked up the phone and sat on hold and waited for all that to occur. This time I didn't have to do that. But technology creates its own challenges. We see all of the changes that are occurring as part of these advances in technology, but more importantly, we're seeing what's happening with the workforce that goes along with that. The skill sets that we need today in all businesses is changing so rapidly. I mean, if you just think about technology in your personal life, how many of you have a cell phone that's over 5 years old? You know, so if you look at your business and we look at how much technology changes in 5 years, that just indicates how much change we're going to need in training and development going forward. I talk about this with my students all the time because they're going to be in school for 4 years and some of the things they learned the first year will be obsolete by the time they get to graduation because technology is changing that rapidly. So we have to really be on target with the technology that's out there. But we have to be smart about it. We can spend too much on technology and put our business in a bad place, but we have to spend enough to be effective in terms of competition and dealing with competitive advantage. You know, we can't ignore technology because it is changing around us. And so we have to figure out what skill sets matter the most for us. Next slide. For me, then the big issue then is how does this digital transformation affect our supply chain for talent? You know, we can talk about robotics and automation and digital transformation all the time. And when we take that into account with the macroeconomic variables, such as the port congestion and so on, will things get better in the future? We'll talk about that in a little bit, but we have to be on top of what's going on there. But right now we're going through this process of redefining our workforce as we are redefining how work itself is being done. You know, so we have to change how we do our recruiting today. We have to change how we do reskill the current workforce that we have. And how do we retain the people that we have? You know, talking about retaining your workforce without breaking the bank that was mentioned earlier, I think that's going to be a really hot topic going forward. But what this really means for me is that we have a limited supply of labor coming out of high schools and colleges in the coming years. It's just the demographics of our country, and we are not going to have this surplus of talent waiting to find a job with us. We have to be really smart about how we recruit, who's we're going to be able to have on board to recruit, and who we can retain, and who do we have now that we can reskill. I think that's the biggest opportunity I see in most of the companies that I work with, is that we have a team in place, and we've done training to get them to this point. We've got them onboarded somehow to do the jobs effectively and efficiently. The question is, how do we move forward from here, and what changes are going to be needed in the future? And if we talk about retention, this is really a key issue for that workforce that we have in place now. We have a lot of people have been sitting in their jobs for the last 2 years waiting for changes to occur. Now that opportunities are available, we see a few more people looking over the fence at other opportunities. So we can't take our employees for granted, okay? Because there are other companies out there that are looking at your workforce saying, I wonder how many of those we can hire. And so you have to be really smart about how you retain those people, because if your choice is to hire somebody that's working for somebody down the road, or somebody who's been on the couch for 2 years, which one are you going to hire? Okay. And so those are the kinds of selection questions I'm dealing with right now with the employers I'm working with. They're being very technical in how they start looking at workforces and talent pools. And if they think that there's a business that has excess talent available, somebody's moving a business or they're shifting production or something like that, well, they're on top of that in a hurry to figure out how to start recruiting there right away. We just held our career fair here last week at UNO, and this is finally back to where we were just prior to the pandemic. We've never had more employers, and we've never had more students interviewing for jobs here than we did last week. So it's good to see that much activity again. But the jobs are outpacing the graduates right now, at least coming out of high school and college for us. Next slide. The other thing that happens when we talk about hybrid workforce is this merge of talent and technology, and the organizational resistance can come from all areas. Part of that is driven by this intergenerational workforce that we're developing. One of the things that we've done over the last couple of years is work really hard to retain the workforce and the senior members of our workforce for longer. We don't want them to retire early. We want them to stay on with us as long as we can. And we have more firms out there hiring high school graduates and helping them through college or community college or dress training on the job, if that's what they need, and just start a career right out of high school. But the reaction to technology varies across the generations, varies across different cultures and different businesses. We have different kinds of resistance in place. We have reactants where choice, I don't like doing it this way. If you have somebody that's been into your company for 20 years or more, they may have some resistance to this because I don't want to change what I've been doing. I've been doing it this way for 20 years. There's a trust factor that you really have to be on top of with today's workforce, and that's for all employees. The question is right now is how do you get an 18-year-old and an 80-year-old to work efficiently side by side in your business? And that's an intergenerational challenge for us, especially when we put technology in the middle of that equation. Both of them will have different reactions to technology. And so they're going to want to make sure that they understand how it works and how they can use it and how it will help them, not just the business, but how does it help them? So it causes a lot of scrutiny. Everybody's, evaluating technology now, trying to understand how we best use it and trying to counter any weaknesses that are created. And then some are just would stay in the status quo. I've been comfortable in this job for 10 years. I don't want to change. And so again, this is a challenge for managers and owners. We have to embrace the workforce that we have. We have to convince them that this is the opportunity to do things better, and that we can even make their quality of life better on the job if we can. Subjective well-being in the workforce is a big issue for us. We've talked about employee engagement for a long time. How do you engage your employees, how to get them to be productive, and so on. And we've even gone so far as to try to understand what makes them happy in the workplace. And those are all important factors, and we do need to take those into account, but it has to be more than that now. They have to understand not only what you're doing as a business, but how you're doing it and why you're doing it. They want to belong to something that's more than just a job. This is especially true for the young generation of workers that are coming out. They want to be part of something that means something to them. And a paycheck as a means to an end is just not going to cut it for them anymore. As we think about those kinds of challenges, this technology and talent integration is what's going to create opportunities and challenges for some time to come for all of us in business. Next slide. If I take a look at the employees that we survey and the employees that we interview across different business sectors, these are the kinds of things that they find most important today. Now, flexibility at work has always been in the top 2 or 3 categories for us over time, but the pandemic now has moved it to the top spot. Why? Because they want flexible work hours. They want flexible location if possible. Can we work from home? Those are the kinds of things that we see in the workforce today. So flexibility at work has really become a big issue. Challenges with things like daycare and those kinds of costs are impacting how they perceive work. We have to make sure we understand how we can help our employees through that challenge and understand what we can do to help provide that flexible environment that is meaningful to them. Second one is training and development. This usually shows up in the top 2 or 3 of all the studies that we do. So training and development, they want to know what's next. And if you can provide a pathway for something better in the future, that's how you keep your workforce engaged and how you retain them, because they want to understand, or they want to believe that things are going to be better 5 years from now than they are today. And if they have that kind of hope that their work life is going to be better in 5 years, they are more likely to stay with your organization. Wraparound support. This has meant different things at different organizations. I've seen quite a few innovations in this space as far as what does wraparound support look like. In some cases, it has constituted better parking arrangements and better commuting arrangements for getting to work because they were in congested areas. Others include things by providing a daycare center at work. And so the employee may still pay for it, but it's available there now, and it cuts down on commute time because they don't have to take children to a daycare and then come to work and then do this reverse at the end of the day. So providing a daycare facility has become a more popular idea around this thing. And then there's the other issue is having any other type of support services available. If they can do certain things on the job that help fulfill things at home for them, in addition to childcare, what kinds of support can we provide in terms of school and education and so on? Getting kids to and from schools become a challenge these days. So we have to make sure we understand that. I've already talked about meaningful work, and I just can't stress that enough. This has never come up so high as it has since the start of the pandemic, is that we are looking for more meaningful work with our employees today. And it's really a high factor for them. And like I said, employee well-being is really about feeling better about the future and being responsible about what's going forward in the future. The last one that has come up in recent years in our studies is social responsibility. And that has to do with your business, and it's not just going green or anything like that. Do you operate an ethical business? Is it a brand that they feel good about? Do you sell products and services that they feel good about? Are you helping the community? Are you creating jobs in the community? And you provide support for employees. Those are the kinds of things that they're looking for. The pandemic allowed employers to really step forward. When we went through all of the transition phases there, employers reacted differently. And for some of them that really worked hard with their employees to keep them on board and keep them engaged and keep them supported through the early stages of the pandemic in particular, they're going to keep some of those employees for a long time because they really did create an environment where they felt like they were highly valued and they were a socially responsible company. And employees really need that these days. Next slide. So when we bring the conversation back to supply chain management, we go into the question of innovation. What are the new things that we need to do from here? And this is not just about new product development or anything like that. It's about what we're doing today and how do we do that better, more efficiently or more effectively. When are we doing it? Flexible work hours is becoming a big issue for our workforce. And so when is it being done and so on? It's also important we start to think about this from a supply chain perspective. What's going on with your suppliers? What's going on with how they do business? Are they changing business hours? It's also true downstream. What's happening with your customers? What are their expectations now? Who's doing it? As we deal with the bottlenecks, we have to make some decisions on make or buy. Do we keep buying some of the things we do? Do we keep outsourcing some of the services that we do? Or do we have to start picking up these services or figure out how to create these components or products ourselves? So who's doing the work is a big factor, because it influences where it's being done. And those kinds of things, in fact, impact the technology needs that we have, the employees and needs that we have, and so on. The real question here is, how well does your business perform when you make a change? And one of the things that I really stress with all businesses, small, medium, and large, is, are you keeping track of changes that matter? Sometimes we get caught up in making changes for the sake of change, and we want to make sure that they're really improving your business. And I like to talk about the effective frontier for businesses at this stage. We focused on efficiency a lot from the recession of 2008 and 9 up to the pandemic. We had high transportation costs, we reduced inventory, and for over 10 years, we focused on everything on streamlining and just-in-time inventory management programs and so on. And the pandemic hits and we hit the bottlenecks, and now we're trying to deal with the other side of this discussion. Okay, how do we deal with things when we stock out? What happens if we can't get our stuff on time? And so those are the new questions that we're really asking today. And the real question here is, why is this important for our ecosystem? And our ecosystem here is really simple. It's, how does our business fit in between suppliers and customers? I mean, most of us have suppliers of some sort. Most of us have customers of some sort. The real question is, what kinds of things can we do to make this whole ecosystem work better? How can we work with our suppliers to provide more value-add services or products to our customers? And what do we have to do to work with our customers to enhance their experience or get them to purchase more from us or make them more loyal customers for us? Next slide. This is something I like to talk about in terms of information needs, because this is one of the challenges that we see in most situations. We can gather a lot of information these days. Technology at all levels and all sizes of all types of businesses can collect more information now about themselves, about their customers and their suppliers than they ever had before. The question is, how much information do you need? Are you acting on what's really valuable to you? The real question is, does the information that you're gathering really add value to how you outrun your operation? We collect a lot of interesting stuff. Don't get me wrong. We have great dashboards and we put together some great charts and we keep track of very important things, or at least interesting things for our business. But do they really change how we manage the business? Is the information specific to your company, or do we get tangled up in the news events today? One of the challenges that we have today is every time we turn on the news, we start thinking about the big picture of what's happening out there. As we do that, we lose a little bit of focus on what's happening internally. So we want to make sure that, don't be afraid to tune the news out regularly so you can focus on what's happening in your business. It's too easy to get wrapped up in thinking about what's going on with the pandemic, what's happening with Ukraine, interest rates, price of fuel or energy. And we can end up dwelling on that too long, and it becomes detrimental to our business. We have to figure out how to relay what's really going to affect our business directly and how to manage that, because there are going to be hard questions and hard decisions we're going to have to make. So when you're looking at the information that you keep track of in any given day, what do you look at on Monday morning when you start the week? What do you look at at the end of the week? What information is important to you? Is the information complete? Do you have everything that you really need on the important things? Is it relevant for improving your business? Are you getting it on time? Accessibility is about sharing this with your employees. Sometimes we need to share metrics with our employees so they understand if things are getting better, or if their processes are improving, or if quality is improving. Sometimes we have to share information about the customer experience itself. Are we creating customers that are more satisfied? Are we creating more loyal customers? Are we able to grow our business coming out of the pandemic? And finally, accuracy and context. In context, I'll go back to the news again. We have to be on guard to not let the news wear us down. We have to be on guard that we are focused on our business and identify the opportunities that are there. In many cases, there are going to be different opportunities than they were before the pandemic. Some of them will be the same, but there are going to be new ones that are out there, and we have to figure out how to capitalize on that and do the best we can. There are also going to be some things we have to stop doing if we don't get these bottlenecks figured out in a timely manner. And so it's really a matter of identifying where you can still operate efficiently, where can you operate profitably? And those are the kinds of questions we should be looking at right now. We should also be looking at things like inventory management and so on. When we're dealing with shortages, we're not short of everything all the time. We have specific shortages and we're able to get other things a little more easy. Which ones matter for your business? And that's where we need to focus our effort. Which products, which services do you sell the most of? Which ones provide the most margin for your organization? Which ones build your brand and make you look good in the marketplace? And where are you an effective competitor? Where can you lead the market in your space or your community or your business area? Those are the kinds of things we need to be asking now in order to put this actionable intelligence checklist together and how we create action items for going forward, because we're all going to have to be pretty creative going forward. And it's important that we find out what's important to be successful. Next slide. For me, this comes down to a simple concept, and it's called the idea of finding just one more opportunity. We know what we were doing before the pandemic. We know what we're doing today, but what's one more thing we can do tomorrow coming out of the pandemic based on what's happening in Ukraine, based on what's happening with the interest rates and so on? We can focus on business processes at our company. We can look at our suppliers and our supply chains, but we should be looking for one more opportunity. What's one more thing we could use to get our business back on track to the next level? Because that's what we need to be looking at now, is moving forward to the next level. Where do you go for new ideas? You know, one of the things that's happened in the last 2 years, the idea of conferences and trade shows. We don't always have time or the funding to go travel and go to trade shows with a lot of small and medium business people, right? There are so many more virtual events now that we can attend. I highly encourage you to attend to some of those because you'll find some good ideas. And sometimes you can find networking opportunities when you attend these events. So I encourage you to think about doing that, because what you're looking for is one more opportunity, whether it's one more supplier, one more customer, one more product, one more service, a new idea on how to implement your technology. Is just one more thing. That's what we need to be focused on going forward. Are you part of an association or a network? You know, this is an important part of doing business today. You know, we have, most of us have chambers of commerce in our communities. We have business professional groups. We have educational groups. If you haven't joined any of these, I highly encourage you to consider joining one. Again, it's the sharing of ideas, even if they're not in your business or in your business space, the ideas that they may share about technology, managing talent, doing better recruiting, doing better retention. And who knows, maybe a new product idea or maybe a new partnership. But I highly encourage you to get involved with these association networks. I run a network here with 48 businesses, and the networking among them has been phenomenal over the last 7 years. They have come up with new ideas to share with each other and so on. Last to talk about is, do you meet with anybody outside of your organization or outside of your industry? Do you meet with, you know, schools, high schools and universities? Do you meet with the local government officials? Do you have a customer advisory board? Now, who are your best 2 customers? And if you talk to them about what you could do for them, ask them what you could do for them, because they may have ideas on how you could create a new business opportunity. I find customer advisory boards would be extremely helpful in coming up with that one more idea to add value to what we can bring to the market. Do the same thing with your suppliers. If you're working with a couple of suppliers, make sure you ask them, what's one more thing you guys are doing that you could do for us? What's one more service we could utilize that you offer that we're not using today? And you'll be surprised sometimes. They may have some ideas based on who they're working with in other places, where they may have one more thing that you could utilize in your business. Next slide. As we talk about wrapping this up, then it's about the leadership for strategic leadership for supply chain design. And this is where business owners and managers really need to reinvent what we're doing today. We have to reinvent our talent strategies. We have to reinvent our technology strategies. Sometimes we have to reinvent the products and services that we're providing, because expectations of our customers are different. We have to recognize the changes that have been driven by the pandemic. We have these differences in convictions by employees. We have different cultural values as our workforce becomes more diverse. Operating norms have changed for many businesses due to flexibility and work hours and those kinds of things. And they affect not only what happens inside our business, but it affects how our suppliers operate. And if it changes how our suppliers operate, it's going to have to change how we operate to accommodate that in many cases. And finally, it's about preparation for opportunities beyond COVID-19. You know, as we move from a pandemic stage to an endemic stage where it becomes more regional and in nature and so on over time, we have to start looking up from our desk and looking out in the future for bigger ideas. So we've been doing all the little things necessary to keep our business afloat during these times, but now it's time to start taking a moment time to time and look forward out on the horizon. What can we do for the future? It's time to bring the big picture back into our discussion again. We have some interesting challenges ahead of us. We have some interesting and terrific opportunities ahead of us. And I encourage you to think about what's right for you, what's right for your business, and so on, because that's how we're going to move forward from this pandemic. And that's how small businesses and medium businesses are going to be successful going forward. We have to think about the big picture. It's time. It's time to look up to the horizon again. That's all I have for today. Questions?
Steve,
thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll turn it over to you, Jim, for the questions.
Yeah, we do have at least one question. Remember, always take questions either in the Q&A or the chat box. First question is, what are the key specific causes of these supply chain disruptions? And I'm sure you answered that, but maybe just for sake of summary.
Yeah. I think that's a terrific question. We can talk about some of the things that are causing the supply chain challenges we have today. As an example, we've had strong demand. We have had terrific demand. Again, customer demand in February was very high again. And it was a record month. If we want to talk about, say, for example, shipping containers coming into our country, we brought in more in February than we've ever done before. And it's not that our supply chains are broken. We just overloaded the system. What happened when we had the shutdown is we sent everybody home and everybody went home from school for distance learning and so on. And we had restricted hours. Nobody could go out and eat anymore. We couldn't go to sporting events or we couldn't go to the movie theater, or we couldn't go to concerts and those kinds of things. And so what happened? We all went home and started buying stuff. We started buying stuff off of Amazon. We started buying stuff. We bought products from the store. So the product service ratio changed during the pandemic, and because we couldn't go out and buy experiences like we used to. We couldn't go out and eat as often. We didn't take the same kinds of vacations that we did before. We couldn't go to all the concerts and things. And so we spent our money on stuff. And what happened is we started ordering all these products and we just overloaded the supply chain system. At its peak, I'll use the California port. It peaked at about 109 container ships that were backed up at one point out there. The aftermath of the holiday season, now they have that down to about 48 ships as of now. So they've cut it in half. So we're gaining on it again, but we're going to start seeing that pick up again for the next holiday season in a few months. So we're going to be dealing with shortages for a long time. It's just because we've overloaded the system. We're seeing a strong job market. We've created so many jobs and people going back to work, and the number of people being employed are creating incomes again. So people can keep spending. So those are creating some of the bottlenecks. That's a really good question. And yet we're all worried about the next variant, right? The Omicron wave reminded us of what could happen. And so we went back to stockpiling a little bit at home. And so we started buying things in bulk again, and it created some shortages of products in the retail space again. But part of it's just dealing with the pandemic. But those are the kinds of things that I see creating these challenges. And then we had the shortage of labor that has occurred now, and that's going to be a long-term problem. That was starting to occur before the pandemic. The pandemic just brought it to the forefront.
Great. Any other questions or comments by anybody, either in chat or Q&A? As we're waiting, Dr. Schultz, maybe real quickly, I know it wasn't what you prepared for, but with Ukraine and what's going on overseas, how do we see that affecting our supply chain?
Sure. It's going to be interesting to see how the situation in Ukraine does affect our supply chains, because over the last year, because of the congestion on the West Coast, we started to see more shipments transition to the East Coast and more shipments and trade with Europe. And that has been disrupted again because of what's happening in Ukraine. We have businesses and organizations that have slowed down on a wait and see attitude. Some of them are not working at full force right now. And so there's been a little bit of a slowdown there. And so we have to be very careful about those things because it could disrupt the other side of this. We've had the disruption of goods and services, goods especially coming out of Asia. Now we may see a disruption of goods coming out of Europe as well. The other issue here is energy, of course. The issue of oil prices and so on is a big factor for all of us. We all need energy to keep operating, and certainly we all have to do our part about conserving energy, going green, and all those kinds of things are all important initiatives, but we have to get there. And so we have to learn how to manage our energy, how to make sure we take care of our own businesses going forward. And then the Ukraine-Russian challenge for all of us is, what's going to be the outcome there? And the different outcomes are going to have a different impact on all of us. What we have to do is watch the news a little bit, don't let it consume you, make sure we understand what's going to happen for us, but to start thinking about how that might affect anything. If you're purchasing anything from Europe, I would be looking at what kinds of things should we be doing as a backup plan right now? I wouldn't wait for that disruption to occur. I would start considering what the other options would be at this point in time.
Super. And I'm still waiting for questions.
Jim, I wanted to pose real quick to Steve. We get a lot of clients that come in that are interested in starting trucking businesses or getting going on some kind of trucking enterprise. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges in that industry and how we maybe find some solutions there?
Yeah, that's a great question because the shortage of drivers has really amplified during the pandemic. Now, keep in mind, this is like other things in the pandemic. We've been short of drivers now for a couple of decades. Okay, I mean, we've been short of drivers for a long time, and we'd be short 30 or 40,000 drivers at any given time before the pandemic. Now we're short over 100,000 drivers easily during the pandemic because there's all the extra stuff that we're buying. And the trucking industry is dominated by small and medium businesses. 90% of the trucks on the road today are owned by businesses that own 9 trucks or less. And so we're talking about lots of small businesses out there in the transportation industry. And so it's been really interesting to watch because they struggle trying to find drivers and so on. We see a lot of recruiting in high schools now, more than we've ever had. We've always had some recruiting there. We've also had more training schools show up. So across our region now, we've gone from 4 driver training programs to 20, and they're all booked full now. So we're turning out drivers as faster than we've ever turned them out. So this should turn around sometime in the next year or two. Right now, I'm just happy they're finding enough high school graduates and so on, and other people interested in becoming drivers because it's a good paying job, and they can get into this job with the right training program and be contributing right away. The challenges are finding trucks to buy. They've had limited supply there again, but there are some available. We have to be flexible in what we're looking for. New and used are 2 different categories there, but if you spend the time searching, you can find some pretty good deals that can be very affordable, and you can make a profitable enterprise in a fairly short amount of time. But it's hard work. Don't get me wrong. Being a truck driver is a hard job, and if you've never done that, I can't express that enough. I drove a truck when I was in college. That's how I put myself through college. I would drive all summer long. I drove a semi all summer long, and it's a hard job. Okay, and so that's why the shortage is there. But I am excited to see so many more students going into training programs and getting their commercial driver's license and going forward on that there are real opportunities for good jobs here. And we just have to keep encouraging that. If you're short of drivers, go visit your high school. We're going to have to grow our own and talk about opportunities at your company, not just as drivers, but other areas of your business. Go be a guest speaker at a high school class. It can be very helpful in getting your name out there that they may never even thought of you as an employer before.
Thanks, Steve. All right, I don't see any other questions, but I'm curious if we have a second link. And this relates to the egg economy. I know already commodity prices are moving up because of what's happening. When do we hit the oh no button because Ukraine and Russia aren't going to be able to plant and so forth?
Yeah, it's just, we're going to see some disruptions in the food supply for sure because of what's happening in Ukraine, because of the wheat exports that come out of Russia and Ukraine make up a pretty sizable chunk of the export market worldwide. So it is going to have a dramatic impact on that supply. We will see some acres and some production shift in other countries as a result of that, but it takes a little bit of time. And so there's going to be a challenge there for a little while, but I don't anticipate seeing empty grocery store shelves or anything like that. It's going to be higher prices for the shortages for a while, and we'll see other substitutes come into play as well. Where we're using wheat before, there are other starches that we can use in some food products and so on. You'll start to see more of that in the coming year as we deal with these shortages. Corn is another one that's not quite as critical as wheat coming out of Russia and Ukraine, but they do export corn, and it's something that's going to have an impact on global prices. We've seen it on commodity prices already here, and what kinds of impact we've seen on the price of wheat, going over $10 or $11 now. That's fantastically high price, and so it's going to cause a challenge there. A little bit longer term, or the intermediate term, it will be the livestock production here. Feeding livestock expensive grain is going to be hard to be profitable for some of the producers. So they're going to be looking at how they manage their way through this as well too. So we want to make sure that we stay on top of that what kinds of shortages are out there can be managed. They're going to happen in some areas. Again, I don't think we're going to see empty shelves. I think it's going to be something along the lines that we saw early in the pandemic. You may not get the exact variety that you're looking for, but there's probably a pretty close substitute available. And I think that's what we're going to see for a little while in our food supply because of what's happening in Ukraine.
Thanks a lot. Any other questions?
I do have one other question, and then we're going to turn it over for some good news from our SBA representative, Elizabeth Yearwood. But Steve, question for you is, I understand you're not an economist, but when we think about and maybe it's happened during this call that the Fed has increased the interest rates, what do you see as the positive opportunities there for small business owners and operators if we do continue to see a rise in interest rates?
Well, interest rates are going to be an interesting challenge and opportunity for a lot of us. It depends if you're borrowing for long-term investments or if you're using it as operating capital and so on. Those kinds of interest rates are going to be things that we have to watch very carefully. And going back to the actionable intelligence, we have to make sure we understand our own margins appropriately. As our cost of goods raise or the cost of our own interest rates raise, we have to really make sure that we take advantage of that. The inflationary nature of some of the long-term or durable goods is something that we have to also take into account, because the prices of some of these things are going to raise well into the future because of inflation until we get it under control. And so it's this tension now, whether we purchase now at a lower price and borrow money, or we try to wait till later, and yet we know at some point it will transition back again. The best thing that I can say about the changes in interest rates is that they'll come into place to address the inflation question that we're dealing with now. And once we get that under control, then they will normalize to whatever that is again, keeping in mind that we haven't had normal interest rates, at least according to my lifetime, of normal interest rates for a long time. And we've all gotten pretty used to low interest rates. And so we have to make smart decisions. We have to be smart about where we invest our money. So when we do borrow money, that we're doing it in something that is going to have a payback for us.
And that's perfect. I love that part. Like, with that, I don't see any other questions. I'll turn it back to you. Thanks, Tony, for putting Dr. Schultz's information in the web, and I did put in the Facebook page for EEC where you can sign up for April session.
Thank you. And thanks, Steve. To give folks a moment, if they have any last questions, I wanted to ask Elizabeth Yearwood from the Small Business Administration to unmute herself. She wanted to relay an announcement that came out through the National SBA, which is in response to the challenges that they're seeing with inflation and supply chain. So, Elizabeth, would you mind giving us an update on the EIDL or EIDL loans?
Yes, absolutely. So just yesterday, the SBA administrator announced that there is now going to be an additional 6 months of payment deferments on existing idle loans. So before, all of the payments were deferred for 2 years. So that's now been extended up to 30 months. And this payment deferment is from the date that you signed the original idle loan, so not your increase. So it is a total of 30 months that payments have been deferred. Interest is still accruing, but you can continue to make payments or not make payments up to 30 months past the date that your loan was signed. And the reason that they did this is because small businesses are experiencing so many challenges now, even more so with the inflation and the supply chain management issues that we've been, talking about for the past hour. We're hoping that this will really help small business owners free up some capital to be able to deal with those challenges. So if you do have any questions about that, I'll put my name and info in the chat, and please do feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And so just to clarify that, that's for anybody that received an idle loan in 2020, 2021, or this year, correct?
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Jim, if we didn't have any other questions come in, we'll provide a couple of closing announcements and let folks get back to their day.
Go ahead, Blake.
Okay. Well, once again, let me formally thank you, Dr. Stephen Schultz, for being with us today. We really appreciate that overview. This is one of those sessions where I'm so glad we record these sessions and post them to our Facebook page. That's Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative on Facebook, because there's so much good information. I'm going to go back to that PowerPoint that we record and probably pick up a couple of other nuggets. Trying to keep up there. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today. I really enjoyed being here today.
We appreciate it. Sorry for the slight technical challenges, but we're all used to that right now, 2 years into this stuff. Again, the recording posts to our Entrepreneurs Education Collaborative page on Facebook. Just go to the videos section. You'll see the catalog of all of our archived videos there. Our next session, we just posted it into the chat. So again, we're continuing them every Wednesday, and we hope that the May session will be also in person as well as virtual. But regardless, we'll continue with virtual sessions throughout the rest of 2022. So thank you all so much for your questions. Thank you all so much for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you all again 1 month from now on another EEC Zoom. Have a wonderful afternoon.